welcome to another Halloween ARC review. This is another ARC book that I got in the horror Facebook group and was kindly gifted to me by the author. So as it is an ARC review, there will be no spoilers going forward. For this, the review of Fireside Horror by PA Sheldon. Now this isn't just one story, it is a collection of stories that connect to each other. So I'll go through each of the stories, there will be no spoilers, and I will just say a little about each story and how it connects and then have my thoughts at the end. Now the story of the title is Fireside Horror and it is set in December 1860. And this tells the tale of a local squire who decides that he wants to marry one of the girls in the village. The differences between age and their station in life doesn't seem to bother him because he thinks she's quite pretty and wants her in his bed, so to speak. Now, even the fact that Polly, who is the village girl, is already in love with somebody else and they are courting, the squire sees fit to put a stop to that, and Polly is quite amorous towards him. She's quite loving. She welcomes his attentions because who wouldn't? She welcomes his attentions so much that she gives him the gift of a wonderful Yule log to put on his fire that night. Now our second story is called The Gribblies, set in August 1901, so the years in this go up. So we do get to present eventually. Or at least present for what the setting. I'll get there. But story 2 is The Gribblies, and this tells the tale of that maybe explorers in places where they don't know the lay of the land, maybe they should pay attention to the locals when they tell you not to go in the deep dark woods at night. Or in the day. Or at all. And if you are wandering around the countryside and the locals tell you not to go somewhere, no matter how far-fetched their story seems to be, you might want to listen to them. Now the third story is The Witch Brands of Wenderlow, and this introduces us to one of our main characters by the name of Elspeth and her journal writings. Now Elspeth has lost her husband and her baby daughter in an accident, and she now fills her time with researching and writing down different pieces of folklore around the town of Wenderlow, or village. I can't quite make which one it is. Now the fourth story is The Toadstone, and this is set in October 1907, and if anyone needs a further warning about wandering about in the woods on Halloween night, I might add, then don't do it, especially when heathen gods are at play. The fifth story is Lady of the Mere, and this is set in March 1908, and this explores a presence in a lake which entices people to join her, especially after sunset. The sixth story in this is called Lure of the Piper, set in May 1909, and all I have to say about this one is, haven't we learnt yet not to follow piping fair music into the deep dark woods? Really? Nothing good can come of it. It might be beautiful music. Stop it. And on to the next story. If you're not going to follow piping music into the deep dark woods, then don't pick up old religious artefacts out of the ground in which they lay. Leave them alone. Nothing good can come of it, as our postman finds out in The Postman's Tale, when he gets into his hands an old religious relic that has done things to its previous owners, who dared to disturb its peace. Put it back. And then we have one of my favourite, I think it's my second favourite story in this, called The Tunnel. And The Tunnel is set in February 1910 in Birmingham, and it has a dark tunnel, a double murder, and a mass exodus from the canals of Birmingham into the countryside, away from this tunnel. Because in this tunnel is a creature unlike any other. This creature should not be allowed. Then we have A House of Two Gods, set in June 1911, and has probably the best character name I have ever read. In all of these, the best character name ever, that being Baltus Whiskafisker. You know, like in Scrabble when you get a load of letters and you jumble them all together and you just chuck them down and find out what you got? That sounds like how the author came up with his name, because oh my god, that can't be a real name. Apologies if somebody is watching this with that name. Come forward, I want to know. But that name is glorious. And then we have the last story and the last entry in the Journal of Elspeth. And this is set in November 1963. And it details Elspeth's journey and what happens to her. I won't say any more. I think it's already out, this book. I think this book is already out. If it is out, I will link it down below so you can check it out yourselves. Now, because it's already out, it could be considered a spoiler, might not be. It really was an interesting read. I enjoyed reading it. Although leaving our curious heroine Elspeth's whereabouts unknown, with a very strong possibility of murder being in there or sacrifice to heathen gods, I thought was a little bit unnecessary. Short stories, especially short stories, don't really need to have an ending. They can just end. They can just cut off because they're short stories. They don't need to have a well thought out ending. In fact, they don't need to end. King does it all the time. He doesn't end his short stories. It just... and there you go. Now, I did like how all the stories progressed, and I did like the stories that were connected to each other. Namely, the Elspeth's Journals ones. Although the stories incorporating the blasphemous book and the heathen god did get just a little bit repetitive for me. And by the time I'd finished this book, I forgot that it wasn't just a collection of stories about Elspeth and her journal and her folklore wanderings, but there was 2 stories right at the beginning that have nothing whatsoever to do with it, because those first 2 stories seem absolutely unconnected to the rest of the stories that are. So I felt if you're gonna have short stories that connect them all, or don't connect any. Because Fireside Horror, that first short story, that is my favourite out of the bunch, and it didn't seem to belong somehow by the end. That's just my opinion. Now, not that I didn't like Elspeth and Nolan's discoveries and the folklore that's in there. I do. I love folklore. It's just, I think that less would have been more. Now, as I said, I think the folklore aspects were incredibly interesting. I love reading folklore, and it was very, very interesting. And they didn't fall into that trap that most folklore tales do at the minute, or right now, by falling into the fear trap. Thanks, Akatar. But it remained something, just out of reach. You don't really interact with what goes on. There's something over there. Ooh, odd. And it did make me feel a sense of respect. Those ancestors, my ancestors, people's ancestors, anybody's ancestors, that had knowledge of how to deal with these creatures of myth. And that knowledge has been lost to time. So if one of those creatures of myth came by today, we wouldn't know, really, that to put iron over the doors prevents them coming in. Put, like old iron, proper blacksmith iron. Not just man-made iron, but the proper stuff. It's all man-made, what am I doing? Now, the presentation, I don't know whether this is in the physical copy because I don't have a physical copy. I downloaded it on my Kindle. But the presentation of it was, at times, and it was more than once or twice, the writing was weird. It was a bit haphazard I'll put a picture up, but it was a bit haphazard all over the page. Like writing is when there's, going to be a picture inserted, but there was no indication that was going to happen. It was just weird. see the picture, it's just odd. But I did like reading it. And this is the perfect anthology to just curl up next to the fire and read while the weather is batting a frenzy outside. It could be raining, stormy, windy. As long as it's dark and cold, this is the perfect horror to curl up and read.